We use a lot of terms, right? Millennial, Gen X, Gen Z. We use terms to talk about colors, male, female, that's trendy, that's dire. My name is Taina, I'm 33, and I'm head of marketing at Depop. And I'm pretty sure that while I'm saying these words, you're probably making up some ideas about who I am, why I am like that. Oh, she's Brazilian, she may be happy. So it's easy for us to kind of box people to try to find meaning. And I think nowadays it's really complicated because technology is really fast and is moving at a speed that we've never seen before. So it's a bit tricky. And this new generation is producing content non-stop. So I would be a millennial, but by no means I would be an expert in what my generation is about, and by no means I would be an expert in what Generation Z is about, because to be very honest, it's changing, and after the 15 minutes that I have here, it would have changed again. But I'll try to give some ideas of a bit of what we see inside Depop and how we relate with these kids. So I don't know how many of you have heard about Depop, but it's basically, it's basically a social marketplace that enables people to discover, buy interesting stuff, and unique things. We were born mobile, so we were born as an app. The initial idea, actually, of the founder, Simon Beckerman, was to have it to support a magazine publication he had called Pig Magazine at the time. Pig Magazine was a magazine that was showcasing the past, the present, and the future of pop culture. So they were the first guys to put in the cover of a magazine people like Jamie XX. The XX at the time was formed by 4 people, people like Tame Impala. So they were really kind of defining culture at the time. And that's in the beginning of the 2000s. So he's like, oh, that's great. I'm going to make a little app to support the magazine and help, the advertisers to sell, perhaps the stylists, the people that they were featuring in the magazine, and make it a marketplace to kind of promote the magazine. Little did he know at the time that a lot of teenagers would be very interested in using Depop. People with large wardrobes, sneakerheads, vintage-addicted designers, small designers that wanted a space to showcase what they were doing. So there is a lot of people started using Depop, and we actually grew a lot organically. Majority of our community nowadays is very young. We are between 16 and 26 years old. Every day I spot new trends on Depop. The latest one I know of is called the Belfie, which is basically backside selfie, to be very polite here. But basically, mobile is such a big part of the generation that it makes sense to be on Depop. So I want to talk about some characteristics, some stuff that we've been spotting. One of them is that physical presence is not that important anymore. So friendships, they don't leverage in physical presence. In fact, it could be an Italian living in Japan, that you're a friend with an Eritrean guy that lives in London. You may never have met each other, and yet you have a very strong connection. So you'll be maybe on Depop putting a tag, a comment, saying, hey, what do you think about this piece of clothing? Or you may be going to a brick and mortar shop and sharing with your followers on Instagram or Instagram stories whether you should buy a Champion jumper or a Palace one. So that's a massive change. So here, there, who cares? No one cares really. You need to be everywhere, and physical presence becomes less important. Is still important, but it's a mix. There is both. You cannot separate digital, offline, and online. There is not such a separation because that doesn't exist anymore. The other point I think is important is that gender is not important. There is a recent research from J.W. Thompson Agency that found out that only 44% of Gen Z actually shopped clothes that were supposed to be for their own gender. Last year, I had a user from Depop coming into the office, and he's based in Manchester, and he told me there is something called the Depop style, and I was like, ooh, that's great, but what's the Depop style? And he was like, oh, it's when we see the girls in Manchester wearing like these oversized jackets that are Tommy, Palace, Pata, Supreme, and we know that they couldn't buy it in a vintage shop. They need to buy it on Depop. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So actually, 70% of our current users are female, and yet the most searched for terms, they fit into the category of menswear. There is a guy that lives in Tennessee, Kurt over there, and he's wearing like dresses, and he fits better in a dress than I could fit in. So it's beautiful. And he did give an interview to Vogue at some point saying, I'm a guy, I dress like a girl, you know, I put these skirts, these dresses that people would think is a girl, and I'm so accepted in this community, and it's really exciting for me. So I think we need to unbox the stereotypes and expectations of gender. In fact, I think in 10 years' time, the word gender won't really exist. The other thing that's important is age. I feel like because now it's about connections and ideas and how people connect to one another, age is becoming less relevant. So you do have someone like Betty Winkle that has the t-shirt Baby Girl. She's 88-year-old, and yet she's a star on Instagram. Or you have young Lennox that's selling prints of hip-hop singers and making money out of it. And that leads to me to the idea of community. Community matters a lot to Depop because that's how we were born. So, and community is not built on countries or cities because, again, you don't necessarily need to have the physical connection with people. But that's not saying that offline is not important. It's really important. In fact, on Depop, it's very common that we have beers on Fridays and users just rock up and say, hey, Tana, what's up? How is it going? You know, can I come for a beer? And I was like, yeah, sure. So it's very common. We have these connections. And we cannot lie about it because in the world that we live in, you cannot really buy relevance. Buying an advertisement on Super Bowl timing doesn't mean that you're going to get downloads. It doesn't mean that you're going to be more interesting for your audience. The audience doesn't want to have I sell and you buy anymore. It's about, they don't want to just be a listener. It's about really creating opportunities for participating, sharing, interacting, having a communication. So the other thing I think is pretty important, can I, yeah? So I call it Be the Boss, Be the Brand, and it's basically, this generation is not really scared about being the boss. You know, they were born at a time that things are pretty complicated. They had cuts in the students' loans. We have a prospect where in the future there may be, you know, the robots will be taking our jobs, so they are quite aware of that. And they're becoming entrepreneurs. They're not ashamed to look greedy. They're not ashamed to say that they are making money. In fact, they are very proud to be independent and real-life hagglers. So any teenager with a smartphone and some creativity, solid Wi-Fi connection, can open a Depop shop and start trying out their luck, you know, start trying out if they are good at it. We have a guy called Daniel from Hook BGM. He's 22-year-old, and he just hired his grandfather, he's retired, and he used to work at the post office facilities to help him sell, and he sells trainers. We have this other girl, her name is Bella McFadden, more known as Internet Girl on Depop. And Bella, she's a Canadian that actually dropped college to focus on her Depop shop. And she has over 370,000 Depop followers, and she's seeing a 58% growth on her month-to-month sales. She's pretty impressive. Recently, we also had a guy doing an internship with us, and I asked him, so what are you doing in uni? And he said, well, you know, I'm taking a gap year. And I was like, oh, that's fantastic. Are you traveling around the world? And he was just like, no, not really. I'm going to live in a cabin. His shop is called The Cabin, with my business partner for a year. And see how my Depop shop goes, and if it's something that I want to put my time into and really maybe drop out of university myself. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's very common because they grew up also in a generation that it's possible to become someone through social media, through social connections. They are in a generation, if you think about it now, that a lot of the models, they are coming from Instagram, singers coming from YouTube. Many people forget about it, but Justin Bieber is actually a YouTube baby. You know, they are also very concerned about sustainability. So, majority of the 60,000 items sold daily on Depop are secondhand or vintage. Because, you know, it's very hard for them to spend maybe 500 to 1,000 quid on a Stella McCartney dress, but at the same time, they can be kind of reselling it and giving a second life to something that would actually end up in landfill. The second-hand industry is actually expected to grow around 11% a year and become a 33 billion industry by 2021, which is pretty impressive. And most of it is going to be due to apps like Depop and resellers of online resellers. So I suppose I'm kind of running out of time. Oh my God, that was fast. I think people want to make their own decisions, their own choices. In the time where there is a lot of information, I think brands need to stay true to their core, but at the same time, they need to be adaptable. And they need to let people live their own experiences and make their own connections and be true to themselves as well. So they need to be open to people and to the relationship they will have with the brand. They cannot force anything. I do believe that the brands that actually will be successful in the future, they are going to be curious brands. They're interested in what's going on around them. They are interested in what's relevant to their core audience, and they are always questioning that. It's less about doing a self-serving exercise. It's way more about how do I fit in here? What do I have to say that's actually interesting and people want to listen to? It's not just about, you know, one size fits all and you know, making a big collar advertisement that no one cares about a product that's not actually really relevant. It's about finding your niche, find your relevancy, and talking and being honest about who you are, your mistakes and the good things you can bring on to the consumer. And that's it. I just think we should just unbox our minds and find ways to create new concepts and discover ways of doing new things. And you know, this presentation I just made is probably irrelevant very soon, so you can just get rid of it as well. Thank you.
That was great. I'm sure that people will be looking for that presentation afterwards. Can I just ask you a question? My kids now get me to buy things off eBay that are underappreciated on eBay, but they know that people on Depop will think are vintage. So you talked about authenticity, you talked about maintaining that connection. How do you make sure that you're not just today's marketplace and then all the people go somewhere else and use a different marketplace tomorrow? What do you own?
Yeah, so I think what's most important about us is that we are not a marketplace where you buy and sell. We are not eBay, we're not Amazon. It's very different. We're actually creating a sense of community. People are telling stories, they're becoming friends. I do know a big seller on Depop that's called Betsy Johnson. And she's friends with Bella McFadden now, and they're both influencers within Depop, and they just created a connection. And I think when you can create this connection, but also when you can communicate with people and invite them over and actually be part of the community that you're nurturing, I think that makes all the difference, because it becomes less about a transaction process and much more about a long-term relationship with these people.
Thank you so much indeed. That was absolutely fascinating. And if nothing else, just taking a photo of you and the brand will make me cool for 10 minutes when I go home. Thank you so much. And that was brilliant. Thank you very much.